Hello everyone, Dave Fernandez here, and today I want to talk to you about how to prioritize your to-do list the best way possible for maximum results. I remember about 10 years ago, the first time I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And if you haven't heard of this book, I strongly suggest, if you're into business or you want to launch your business, that you pick up a copy and read it, because it's full of all kinds of resources and tools and, perspective shifting concepts that are going to change the way you think forever about everything, about life, about happiness, and about business for sure. So in that book, he talks about this concept that at the time was completely new to me, which is the 80-20 principle. And he goes on to explain what it is and also how that concept became or has become his default way of analyzing data or thinking or even leading his own life, right? And why am I telling you about the 80-20 rule or principle? Is because it applies specifically to prioritizing your tasks, your to-do list, and everything that you do in your life. Let me give you a quick synopsis of what the 80-20 principle is all about in case you haven't heard of it before. It was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century by a guy of the name of Pareto. And you might have heard the Pareto rule, the Pareto law, Pareto principle is the same thing. And it all applies to this 80-20 rule that he discovered. It was a pattern that he started seeing everywhere in nature and in life in general, in business, and all kinds of different scenarios. He discovered that 20% of things would make up 80% of results. So sometimes they say 20% of input yields 80% of output, and the other way applies as well. So 80% of things only yield 20% of results. So let me give you a few examples to make this a little clearer, because I know it could be a little confusing. If you were to look at all the movies that have been made this year, for example, and you were to tally up all the revenue that was made from all the movies, okay, you can probably find that 20% of those movies actually created 80% of all the income. And 80% of the movies, most of the movies, only created 20% of the income up until now, okay, if you were to look at year-to-date numbers. That is what Pareto started seeing in the data that he was analyzing, right? I think originally he was looking at wealth distribution in the population. That's another example, right? 20% of the population owns most of the money, most of the assets, okay? 80% of the assets. So 20% gets the majority of things. And 80% of the people, most of the rest of the people, the world, the middle class and poor classes or whatever, which is more than the rich classes, only own 20% of the money worldwide or the assets. Okay, you see, that's a discrepancy that he started seeing everywhere, right? If you look at your own life, you can see that, for example, 20% of the people that you hang out with are responsible for 80% of your happiness, 80% of the fun, for example, right? If you look at all your life, right, 80% of all the things that you do happen around only 20% of activities, for example. Okay, you're always, within a certain routine or whatnot. So this principle you can find anywhere in the universe primarily, right? That's why they call it the universal law. And when you start applying that to productivity, you start seeing that, out of all the things that you have to do in order to create something or to achieve something or accomplish a goal or complete a project, out of all the things, only a few will actually get you most of the results. So what this means is that 80% of the results, 80% of the way towards your goal can be achieved by only 20% of the activities. Okay, so if you had a long list of things to do, right, in order to accomplish a certain goal or to complete a certain project, and you look at the list, you can probably spot the 20% that that are actually going to get you the most results the fastest. And that is how you use the 80-20 rule to prioritize your to-do list. So here's how I use this rule in order to prioritize my tasks during the day or the week, okay? Primarily, what I do is just make a to-do list, just like anybody else, right? What are all the things, I ask myself, what are all the things that I need to do in order to accomplish this one thing or to complete this one project, okay? So I go on and brainstorm for a few minutes, okay? So I have a bunch of things on paper, and then I look at the list and start putting numbers next to it, like a 1 or 2 or 3. So 1 meaning, their priorities, 2, their second priorities, third priorities, or whatnot, okay? So what you'll see is that if you really ask yourself, okay, what are the activities here on this list that are gonna get me the most results the fastest, right? If I were to accomplish them like today or this week, okay? So out of that list, you'll see that only a few, like 2 or 3 things out of 20, will actually be the ones that can get you closest to your goal if you were to accomplish it, right? And the rest, will contribute, right? There's a lot of little things that have to happen maybe, but they're only gonna contribute about 20% of the result, right? So if I were to focus, I think to myself, if I were to focus just on those, 1, 2, or 3 things that are gonna get me closest to the goal, then I'll be there in like no time, right? And that's one of the secrets that this ultra successful use in order to accomplish more and faster, right? So they focus on this 20% of things that get them results fast and at higher levels, okay? And then they allow their team or other people to help them with the minute stuff, the 80% of tasks that anyone can do. They're not necessarily important, right? So that's why you see, a lot of people accomplishing so much, in so little time. It's just because they go on and spot those tasks, the 20% of things that will get them the most results the fastest. As you begin prioritizing your tasks using the 80-20 rule, you'll start realizing how the 20% of things that are gonna get you most of the results are the things that we tend to avoid the most. So that's another sign that, that can help you prioritize things the right way. If you feel, a certain level of resistance to doing that task, but that one task is probably the most important thing you could do right now, then that's a good sign that you should start there. As you can see, utilizing this 80-20 rule to prioritize your tasks can actually yield incredible results incredibly fast, right? So if you really look at what you're doing, you are eliminating the unimportant, right? That is, when you focus on the 20% of things that are gonna get you, the most results, it's a work of eliminating all the other stuff that is unimportant. So a lot of times we're not necessarily very clear, as to what we need to accomplish or what we want to accomplish, right? So that's the first step. You need to understand what it is that you want to do, and then just, again, brainstorm the how, all the steps, whatever comes to your mind, just put them down on paper. And then once you're ready with that, then you spot the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that will get you the most results, and either delegate the 80% that is only contributing a small percentage of the results, or delegate all that stuff. Or did I say delegate or eliminate? Okay, so that's the key. In my own life, I have learned to eliminate an enormous amount of things by just being conscious of it, right? Just asking a quick question like, is this really part of the 20% or the 80%, right? So if I ask myself that of every task that I do, is this part of the 20% or the 80%? And if it's part of the 80%, it must go in order to make room and time and make resources available for me to focus on the 20%, okay? As you can imagine, this is easier said than done, right? Primarily because a lot of times we're not very clear as to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. We haven't defined the goal very well, so we're just all over the place. So we don't know if one activity is more important than the other, okay? But once you take that step of really defining what it is that you're trying to accomplish, right, it makes things a lot easier to prioritize. So that's another tip that I wanted to share with you. Just always start with, the end in mind, Stephen Covey style. Always start with the end in mind, right? So you know exactly what the target is and what has to happen for you to get there. So you have a way of measuring when you get there. Okay, you know exactly when you have hit the goal. Okay, knowing that or having that level of clarity, then it becomes easier to put all these tasks to the task of whether they belong to the 20% or the 80%, and whether they deserve focus or deserve to be either eliminated or delegated. One last idea that I wanted to leave you with is the fact that the process of eliminating things could be trickier at the beginning because you're used to do things in a certain way, to think in a certain way, and based on your programming, you may be inclined to feeling like you need to do everything. Sometimes we have programs that say, well, if I don't do all this stuff, I'm gonna look like I'm lazy, right? Have you ever felt that way? Sometimes we're in a work environment or something where other people don't have this type of awareness. They don't know these techniques. They just focus on whatever is thrown at them, and they don't even bother asking the question, like, is this important? Why am I doing this? Is this part of the 20%? Does this support our goals in a grander scale or not? Sometimes this type of awareness is not available, and there's fears of looking like you're not doing your job, or that you're not focused enough or whatnot. That's why the process of elimination could be a little trickier at the beginning. But I just wanted to leave you with that, because you're gonna have to fight that tendency of wanting to do it all, of feeling, right, that everything has the same weight. It doesn't matter if you do this or that, they're all gonna yield the same amount of results. It doesn't work like that. So you have to treat them accordingly using the Pareto rule. Please share your thoughts down below with me in the comments, and let me know what part of this video was the most helpful to you. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know next time there's a video available. In the meantime, go ahead and watch these 2 videos. I'm sure they'll add a lot of value to your life as well. Until next time, I wish you all the best, and let's get out there and start changing lives one session at a time. See ya.